The ocean always felt like home to me. Its endless rhythm, gentle, powerful, constant, had been the background music to every memory worth keeping. Our beach house stood on the edge of a quiet cove in Cape Haven, with white shutters and sun-faded paint that smelled faintly of salt. My parents bought it when I was 6, back when the world felt unshakably safe. After they were gone, it became my anchor. When I inherited the house, my sister Mara didn't protest. The will had divided things fairly. She got the apartment in the city. I got the beach home where our parents' hearts had always lived. Mara had never been much of a beach person anyway. She preferred noise, energy, and the comfort of people always nearby. But every summer, she'd still come to visit, bringing her husband, Dylan, and their little dog, who barked at the waves as if they were personal enemies. At first, I welcomed them gladly. Family, after all, was all I had left. Dylan was charming in the kind of way that made you second, guess your instincts. He had that salesman's smile, too confident, too easy, always complimenting, always joking, but his eyes never really smiled with the rest of him. He'd pat the wooden railings of the porch, run his hands along the old beams, and whistle softly. "This place is something else, Elena," he'd say, his voice smooth like polished glass. "A house like this, it's priceless. You ever think about how much it's worth?" I'd usually laugh and brush it off. "It's not about money, Dylan, it's home." But he'd just grin, that calculating glint flickering in his gaze. Of course, he'd say, "Still, it's nice to have family property, keeps things equal." At the time, I thought it was an innocent comment. Now, looking back, I can see every warning sign I ignored. Mara would just smile nervously when he said things like that. She'd squeeze my hand and change the subject, talking about her job or some new restaurant she'd tried. She wasn't like him, never was. She was softer, too trusting, and she had always loved him more than he ever deserved. During their visits, Dylan liked to insert himself into everything, offering to fix things that weren't broken, wandering through the rooms as if taking mental inventory. Once, I caught him standing in my parents' old study, holding my father's nautical compass, the one engraved with his initials. He turned it over in his hand, admiring it. "Beautiful piece," he said. "You could sell this for a few hundred easily." I took it gently from him and placed it back on the shelf. "Some things aren't for sale," I replied. He just smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The house began to feel different when they were there. The laughter still echoed, but it felt thinner, like a song played slightly off key. Even the sea breeze that used to feel warm now carried something heavy, something unspoken. I started noticing the small ways Dylan tested boundaries. He'd joke about how the house should belong to both sisters. He'd insist on paying for groceries, only to brag later about investing in the property. Once, he even called it our house while talking to a neighbor. I remember the way Mara's face flushed when I caught the words. She opened her mouth as if to correct him, but didn't. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I stood alone on the porch, watching the waves blur into the horizon. The moonlight shimmered across the water like spilled silver. I thought about my parents, how they had built this house with love, brick by brick, believing it would keep our family together. I didn't know then that it would become the very thing to tear us apart. The sea hummed softly below, whispering secrets I didn't yet understand. I wrapped my arms around myself and listened, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones, and for the first time, my beloved beach house no longer felt entirely like home. It started with an envelope, a simple, cream-colored envelope sitting in my mailbox one windy afternoon. I almost ignored it until I saw the seal from the county property registrar's office. My stomach fluttered, a strange unease rising in my chest. Inside was a formal notice titled Claim of Ownership Dispute. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The words blurred together, but one line cut through everything. Co-ownership claimed by Mara Whitfield, my sister's name. At first, I laughed, a hollow, disbelieving sound that died quickly in my throat. It had to be a mistake. Maybe a clerical error. But when I reached the section that listed supporting documents, my breath caught. It referenced amended deeds, family intent letters, and even a signed statement, supposedly from me. My own forged signature stared back at me in bold black ink. The air seemed to thin around me. I called Mara immediately, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Lena, everything okay?" I tried to steady my voice. "Did you file something about the beach house?" A long pause, too long. Then she said, too lightly, "What? No, of course not. Why would I?" "Mara, there's a document here. It says you claimed co-ownership with a signature that looks like mine." Her silence filled the line like static. When she finally spoke, her tone wavered. "Dylan said something about checking the property rights. Just, to protect our family's stake. He said it was a legal formality." "A formality, Mara, this is forgery." She inhaled sharply. "Don't yell at me, Alina. I didn't know. He told me it was standard paperwork, that you might sell the place without telling me." Her words hit me like a slap. "Sell it. I'd never do that. It was our parents' home." "I know," she whispered. "I just didn't want to lose it too." There it was, the thread Dylan had pulled on until it snapped. He knew how much Mara loved nostalgia, how easily fear could cloud her judgment. He had wrapped his lies in the language of family, and she'd believed every word. After we hung up, I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the framed photo of our parents smiling in front of the sea. My heart hurt in a way that went beyond anger. It was grief, the kind that makes your chest ache because something sacred has been broken. That night I barely slept. The shadows on the walls seemed longer, sharper. Every creak of the house sounded like a warning. Over the next few days, I began to uncover the full extent of Dylan's scheme. He'd used old family paperwork copies of our parents' original mortgage documents, old tax forms, and doctored them to look official. He even managed to digitally lift my signature from a scanned lease agreement. The worst part, the preliminary county office review had accepted the claim as pending investigation. If I hadn't received that letter, he might have succeeded. I confronted Dylan 2 days later outside their apartment. He opened the door with his usual smug grin, but it faltered when he saw the letter in my hand. "Elena," he said smoothly, "you look upset. Something wrong." I held up the papers. "You forged my name. You tried to steal my house." He laughed like it was all a joke. "Steal, please. I was just correcting a mistake. Your parents wanted the property to stay in the family. I'm helping that happen. By lying," he shrugged. "By fixing what should have been ours." Ours, that word lingered like poison. I walked away that day shaking not from fear, but from resolve. Dylan had underestimated me. He saw me as soft, sentimental. He had no idea how far I'd go to protect what my parents built and what he tried to steal. As I drove back to the beach house that evening, the horizon burned orange with sunset. The sea was calm again, but I wasn't fooled. Beneath the stillness, a storm was gathering, and this time I wasn't the one who'd be caught unprepared. The ocean was calm the morning I decided to end it. The air was sharp with salt, and the waves moved like something alive. Eddy, deliberate, inevitable. I stood on the porch of the beach house, holding the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone before I called Dylan. He answered on the second ring. "Elena, finally. I was starting to think you'd run off." His voice had that smug undertone I'd come to despise. I forced a light laugh. "Run off? No, just tired of fighting. You were right. It's not fair that one of us keeps everything our parents built. Maybe it's time to make things equal." There was a pause, then a note of greed crept in. "You mean you're willing to sign? Come down this weekend," I said smoothly. "Both of you. We'll go over the papers together. I'll sign whatever's needed." He didn't even try to hide his excitement. "You won't regret this, Elena. We'll make it official." But he was the one who'd regret it. After hanging up, I called Detective Rains, the officer who'd been quietly helping me since I discovered the forged documents. We had gathered enough evidence, copies of the fake deeds, the doctored signatures, and recordings of Dylan's previous threats. But what we needed was a confession, and I knew exactly how to get it. Rains agreed to send 2 plainclothes officers to wait nearby. "Keep him talking," he said. "We'll come in when you give the signal." I spent the next 2 days preparing the house. I dusted every shelf, opened every curtain, and strategically placed 2 small recording devices, one on the mantel, another under the dining table. It felt strange, almost theatrical, setting the stage for betrayal to reveal itself. My parents' house had seen love and laughter for decades. Now it would witness justice. When Mara and Dylan arrived that Saturday, the sky was heavy with clouds, a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Mara looked nervous, her fingers twisting in her lap as they parked. Dylan, on the other hand, stepped out of the car with the swagger of a man convinced he'd already won. "Elena," he greeted, flashing that practiced smile. "Glad you came to your senses." I smiled back. "Come in, let's finish this." Inside, I'd set the dining table, neatly 3 glasses, a bottle of wine, and the stack of documents Dylan had prepared. He placed them on the table with a flourish, like a magician showing off a trick. "All you need to do is sign here," he said, sliding the top page toward me. "Then the house will officially belong to both of you. Both of us," I repeated softly, watching his face. "Tell me, Dylan, how did you even manage to get these papers approved? It must have taken a lot of work." He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, it wasn't that hard. I just used the old deed copies from your dad's files, forged a few signatures, and paid someone at the clerk's office to fast-track it. Simple." His words were smooth, careless, arrogant, and every one of them was being recorded. Mara's eyes widened. "Dylan, what are you saying? You told me." "Relax," he interrupted. "It's done. Elena doesn't care anymore, right, Elena?" I held his gaze for a long, silent moment. Then I smiled, cold and steady. "You're right, Dylan. I don't care anymore." That was the signal. Before he could respond, flashing lights spilled through the windows. The front door opened, and 2 officers stepped inside. Dylan froze, the color draining from his face. "Dylan Whitfield," one officer said, pulling out a warrant. "You're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and attempted property theft." Mara gasped, covering her mouth. No, this can't be happening." Dylan turned to me, fury twisting his expression. "You set me up." I stood slowly, meeting his eyes. "No, you set yourself up. I just made sure someone was watching." As they cuffed him and led him out into the rain, I felt the weight of months of pain lift from my chest. The storm outside broke open, thunder rolling across the sea as if the sky itself was applauding. Mara collapsed into a chair, trembling. "Elena, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know," I said quietly, "but you should have." Outside, the waves roared against the rocks. Justice, like the tide, had finally come in. The sound of sirens faded into the distance, swallowed by the sea. Rain drummed softly against the windows, the same steady rhythm that had always comforted me as a child. But tonight, it sounded different, like a lullaby for endings. Dylan was gone. The police car had disappeared down the long stretch of coastal road, and with it went months of deceit, greed, and heartbreak. The house felt strangely silent in his absence, as though it, too, was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Mara sat at the kitchen table, her face pale and wet with tears. She hadn't stopped crying since the moment the officers read Dylan his rights. Her hands shook as she traced the rim of her glass. "I didn't know, Elena," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "He said it was legal, just paperwork to protect us. I never wanted to hurt you." I leaned against the counter, staring out at the dark waves crashing against the rocks. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but you trusted the wrong person." She buried her face in her hands. "I thought he loved me. I thought we were a team." I wanted to hate her, to scream, to make her feel even a fraction of the betrayal that had burned inside me for weeks. But as I watched her crumble, I saw not a conspirator, but my little sister again. The one who used to chase seashells with me along the shore. The one who once believed love could fix anything. "Dylan was good at pretending," I said softly. "He made everyone believe he was what they needed. Don't blame yourself for being fooled. Just don't let him take more from you than he already has." She lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes full of guilt. "Can you forgive me?" The question lingered in the air, heavier than the storm clouds outside. Forgiveness isn't instant. It's a slow tide. Part of me wanted to say yes right away, to ease her pain. But the truth was, forgiveness had to grow, and right now, it was still just a fragile seed. "Not yet," I said honestly. "But I will try." Mara nodded, understanding. She reached across the table and took my hand, and for the first time in a long while, her touch didn't sting. We stayed like that for a while, listening to the rain and the whisper of the waves. Eventually, she left, promising to get therapy, to rebuild, to start over. I watched her taillights disappear into the mist, feeling a quiet sorrow but also relief. The kind that comes when the worst has already happened and all that's left is healing. Days turned into weeks. Dylan's arrest made small headlines in the local paper. Man charged in property forgery scheme. The evidence was irrefutable: the recordings, the fake documents, the confession he'd given in his arrogance. He was sentenced to several years for fraud and forgery. When I read the verdict, I didn't feel triumph, just peace. The beach house became mine again, truly and completely. I spent the next month restoring it, painting the shutters white, fixing the garden fence, hanging new curtains that danced in the sea breeze. I replaced the old photo frames on the mantel, this time adding one of Mara and me as children, barefoot and laughing by the water. I didn't want to erase her. I wanted to remember what love looked like before it was poisoned. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset pour gold into the ocean. The sea looked endless, unbothered, forgiving. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the wind, soft and certain. The sea takes what it must, but it always returns what's meant to stay. And she was right. Dylan was gone. The pain, too, would fade. But what remained? The strength, the memories. The house was mine to keep. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first stars blinked awake above the darkening waves. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. The sea hummed beneath the sky, eternal and calm, and I whispered into the wind, "I'm home."